We begin the Gemara today at the top of Daf Tezvav and Aleph. So the Braisa was brought at the end of Yudal Amud Beis that Rochav Hazayna, from her came 8 different Nevi'im. And those 8 Nevi'im that were mentioned there were really 4 fathers and 4 sons. Neriah and Baruch, Sarya, Machasya, Yirmiyah, Chilkiah, Chanamel, Sholem. These are 4 fathers and sons. So the Gemara now says as follows. Bishloime inhu. It's well understood regarding the 4 Nevi'im that are mentioned here. Mifarshi, they say clearly in the pasuk. In other words, the 4 that are the sons are mentioned clearly in the pasuk, which is, as Rashi brings over here, you have Yirmiyah, you have Baruch, and so on. All the ones that are the sons are mentioned clearly in the pasuk. I believe it's, what do you have over here? Right, so those are mentioned clearly in the pasuk, and that they were Nevi'im. Ela avasayu. However, when it comes to their fathers that are mentioned here, minalan. How do we know that their fathers were Nevi'im as well? So the Gemara answers, Kidu'ula. We know this from what Ula taught us. Whenever you have in the pasuk that it mentions the name of the Navi and it mentions the name of his father as well. What that means is it's telling you that this was a Navi, the son of a Navi. Shmoi v'loy shem aviv, if it mentions the name of the Navi but it does not mention his father's name, b'yidua shehu Navi v'loy ben Navi. So then you know that he was a Navi, but his father was not a Navi. That's why it doesn't mention his father's name. So all these names that were mentioned before, because they're mentioned in Nevuah, Ben so-and-so, so therefore we know that the father was a Navi as well. He continues saying, Shmai v'shem yirai mefurish, if it says his name and it says also clearly the name of the city that he came from, so b'yidushu ma'isir, so you know exactly which city he came from. Shmai v'lai shem yirai, if it mentions the name of a Navi and it doesn't tell you which city he came from, b'yidu ashum Yerushalayim, so then it should be known that he came from Yerushalayim and therefore it doesn't mention his city. In a Braisa we learned, Kol Shemaisav, Umaisa Avaisav Stumin. Anytime we find that the Maisim, his actions, and the actions of his fathers are all not spelled out what happened, who they are, what they did. But regarding one of the children, one of them, it does say in the Torah a specific detail that he did that's praiseworthy. Kagain, and it brings an example over here, Dvar Hashem Ashahoya El Tzfanya Ben Kushi Ben Gedalia. So what Tzfanya did we know? It says regarding Tzfanya that he was a Navi, but what Kushi did, what Gedalia did, we don't know. So, but because it tells us about Tzfanya, so B'Yidua, Shu Tzadik, Ben Tzadik, so we know that he's a Tzadik, a son of a Tzadik, all those that are mentioned are Tzadikim. Similar in the reverse, if you have a name of a person and it says regarding one of them that he did something disgraceful, so then we know that all the others mentioned there were also Rishayim. So it doesn't tell us what Nisanya or Elishama did, but we know what Yishmael did. This Yishmael is the one that killed Gedalia ben Achikam. So b'yidua shehu Rasha ben Rasha. Just like he was a Rasha, we know that the others that are mentioned are also Rishayim. He's a Rasha ben Rasha. Going back to the Megillah, Amar Rav Nachman, Malachi. Actually, we're not yet going back to the Megillah. We're talking here about the Nevi'im. So the last of the Nevi'im were Chagi, Zechariah, and Malachi. So who was Malachi? Malachi Zem Mordechai. Malachi was Mordechai. V'lama nikra Shmai Malachi. Why did he get this nickname Malachi? Shahaya Mishnah Lamelech. Since he became the second to the king at the end of the story of the Megillah, so he got this name. In a Braisa, we clearly see that Malachi and Mordechai are 2 people. Braisa says, Baruch ben Neriah, Sarya ben Masiah, or Machasya, another Gersa, and Daniel, and Mordechai Balsha, and Chagi, Zechariah, and Malachi. Kulan isnabu b'shnashtayim l'der yavish. All of these Nevi'im said their Nevuah in the 2nd year of their Yavish. So here, when it counts the different Nevi'im that prophesies in the time of their Yavish, it mentions Mordechai and Malachi separately. To Yufta, so that refutes what Rav Nachman said. Tanya, Rab Shua ben Karcha said, Malachi ze Ezra. Malachi was Ezra. Chachamim say Malachi Shmai. His name was Malachi. He wasn't anyone else. He was Malachi. Rav Nachman said, so Mistavre Kamandama Malachi is Ezra. It's logical, like the one that says that Malachi is Ezra, because we find a similarity in what they were doing for the Yid. The Chsiv ben Nevi is Malachi. What does it say in the Nevuah of Malachi? Bogda Yehuda, that Yehuda was treacherous, V'tayeva Nesa B'Yisrael, and they did an abomination amongst Yidden, Ob Yerushalayim and Yerushalayim, Ki Chilol Yehuda Kodesh Hashem, that they desecrated the holiness of the Eibishter, Asher Oiv Ubal Baskel Necha, that they got married to a non-Jewish girl. So what do we see here in Malachi? That Malachi was giving Yidden the Musar about the fact that they were marrying non-Jewish women. Uman afrish nashim nachrius. Who is the one that worked on this to separate Yidden from the non-Jewish women? Ezra. We find this by Ezra. T'chsiv vayan Shchanya ben Yechiel mibnei Elam. That Shchanya ben Yechiel from the people of Elam came and told Ezra, vayayimel Ezra, anachnu ma'alnu belekenu. That we sinned against the Eibishter, vanoishiv nashim nachrius, and we have sat with non-Jewish women. So we see that Ezra was busy separating Yidden from the non-Jewish women, and it says the same by Malachi. So therefore it's logical to say that they were one and the same person. Tan Rabbanan, and Abraisa we learned. Arba nashim yafifiyais haya ba'ilam. There were 4 beautiful women in the world, Sarah, Avigail, and Rachav, and Esther. And according to the opinion that we mentioned before, Esther Yirakrukis Haisa, that Esther had a green perplexion on her face, so she was not so beautiful in that sense. So then Mapik Esther, you take out Esther, Umayel Vashti, and instead you put in Vashti, that she was very beautiful. Ton Rabbanan Abraisa, we learned Rachav, that Rachav was so beautiful, Bishma Zinsa. If someone just mentions her name, it'll bring him to a taiva of znus. Yal was so beautiful, Bekoila, that her voice brings a person to znus. Avigail Bizchirasa, Avigail was so beautiful that remembering her brings a person to znus. Michal Bashal Biriyasa, and Michal Bashal by seeing her. Rabbi Yitzchak. So Rabbi Yitzchak said about this, Rachav, someone that says the name Rachav, Miyad Nikri, immediately will become a Balkari. Amalei Rav Nachman, so Rav Nachman said, Ana mina Rachav, I said Rachav, and nothing happened to me. Amalei, so he answered him, Kikam mina b'yayda makira. I was referring to someone that knows her and knew her beauty, and he says Rachav, that will cause the taiva and cause him to be a Balkari. So from this we learn, the Mefarshim said the reason why the Gemara is bringing all of this up is to point out the Zehiris a person has to have, when it get to these Inyanim, that it can be guiding a person to be a Balkari. Okay, now we go back to the Megillah. Mordechai Yoda, as Kol HaShana, so Mordechai knew everything that happened. This is the beginning over there, the next Pedic, which speaks about Mordechai, the Torah's clothing, and so on. So Mai Yoma, what exactly did he know? Amarav. Omar, what he said is, Gova Haman me Achashverosh. Haman surpassed, he went greater than Achashverosh. Whatever Achashverosh would have planned to do to Yidden, Haman went past that, even more than that. Shmuel Amar Shmuel said, what he said was as follows, Gova, Malki Ilah mi Malki Tata. The kingdom above is stronger than the kingdom below. Rashi says this is being written there as a euphemism. What it really means is that the kingdom below, the Gzeira of Achashverosh and Haman, was stronger even than the Eibishter's will above, that they want to come and annihilate all the Yidden. The Mashal though learns the Gemara B'Pashtus that Mordechai was davening. He was saying, I hope that the kingdom above could be stronger than the kingdom below, than this Gzeira that there is here below. Then it says, Vatischalchal hamalka. What is Vatischalchal? Mayim Vatischalchal. What does this mean? Vatischalchal literally means her whole inside melted away. Amarav shepirsa nida. She became a nida out of the fear and out of the snooze. But Rabbi Yirmiyah says shehutzachal in a kaveha. It shook up her inside and she needed to relieve herself. Vatikra Esther lasach. Esther called Hasach to go find out from Mordechai what it is that happened. So what does this mean? Amarav Hasach. Who's this Hasach? Hasach zed Daniel. Hasach is Daniel. Why did he get this nickname Hasach? He was cut down from his greatness. In the times of Nebuchadnezzar, Hasach was from the greatest ministers there by the king. And here, Achashverosh cut him down from his greatness. Shmuel says, no, on the contrary. The name of Hasach means that all of the words in the kingdom were cut according to his mouth. And it says in the Pasuk, Ladas, Maza val Maza. She sent Hasach to find out what is it. Let's know what is this and what is this that he's tearing his clothing and why is he screaming? So what is this expression? Maza va'al Maza. Rabbi Yitzchak. So Rabbi Yitzchak said, Shol Chaloi. Esther sent to ask Mordechai. Shem Avri Yisrael HaChamisha Chumshe Teire. Maybe the Yidden were over on what it says in the Chamisha Chumshe Teire D'chsiv Behen regarding the Luchais. It says Mizeh u'Mizeh Hen Ksuvim, that the words of the Luchais are engraved on both sides. So that's why the Yidden deserve this kind of exeira. Then the pasuk says, "Vayagidu leMordechai es divrei Esther." That after Mordechai sent back the message to Esther that she should go to the king and talk to him about this. What did Esther send back? Esther sent back to say that she can't go. So it says Vayagidu. It uses a plural term, meaning it wasn't Hasach. It wasn't the original messenger Hasach that came back, because it uses a plural term. V'ilu ihu lo yazil legabe. Hasach did not go back to report this to Mordechai. So mikan, from here I see, she'ei meshiven ala kalkala. When you have bad news to report, you should not report it. Hasach did not want to go tell Mordechai that Esther refuses to go. So then finally, after Mordechai persuaded Esther that she'll go, so she said, Leich k'noises kol Yehudim v'goymer, you should gather all the Yidden, and then she says she's going to go, Ashalei kados, she's going to go even though she wasn't called to come to the king. Amar Ababe, what did she mean to say when she said Shalei kados? So the Bach takes out this word Haya. So she said, Kol Yom v'Yom, every single day, or Shalei kados Kol Yom v'Yom, not like the rule every single day. Shebechol Yom v'Yom, every single day. Ad achshav, until now, ba'inus. I went to Achashverosh, it was all ba'inus. I not my choice. I had relations with him, but it was all ba'inus. But va'achshav, now if I'm going to go to the king, and I'm on my initiative going to him biratzon, so I'm going to him willingly. And therefore she says, Kasher avadati, then I'll be lost. What does this mean? Kishem shavadati mi beis Abba. Just like I was lost from my father's house, so nakach, oivid numcha, now I'm going to be lost from you, so now I can't remain married to you. So Rashi says, because the halacha of a woman married to a Yisrael is that as long as she has relations with someone else, but oines, so then she can go back to her husband. But now that she's going to have relations with Achashverosh b'ratzain, so she's forbidden to her husband. She can't go back to Mordechai. There's all kinds of pshatim with this, by the way, in the Rishonim, about this Inyan, about how Esther was able to be with Achashverosh. There's Taisvis that says that she's karka olam, she didn't do anything. There's all kinds of pshatim. There's even actually a Zoyar that says that Esther never was with Achashverosh herself. Every time that she had to go to Achashverosh, she sent a shed that looked like her that was with Achashverosh. There's a lot of pshatim in this. Let's continue. Vayave Mordechai. So it says that Mordechai passed over. What did he pass over? Amarav Shehever Yom Rishon Shel Pesach B'Tairis. He passed over Pesach. That year, Pesach, they fasted the first days of Pesach. B'Tainis, as Rashi brings, because the day that they sent out the letters of the Lahashmid Larigul Abed was when Yud Gimel Nisan. So they fasted 3 days. They fasted Yudalit, Tezvav, and Tezayin. And then Tezayin was the day of the second Suda, and that's the day that Haman was hung on the second day of Pesach. Shmuel Amar, Shmuel says a completely different shot. What is Ovar that he passed over? The Ovar Arkuma Demaya. He went over a pool of water, meaning that Mordechai ran around all over the city of Shushan to gather all the Yidden to fast, even running over water one place to another. Then what happened? Esther gets dressed with kingdom. So we had this before in the Gemara. Big day Malchus Miboile. Should have said that she got dressed with her royal clothing. What happened is that Ruach HaKodesh was dressed upon her. Ksiv hacha vatilbash, here it uses the term vatilbash, and ksiv hasam, and another pasuk it says V'ruach lavsha es hamasai, that there was a spirit of Ruach HaKodesh that came upon Hamasai, so we know that it's Ruach HaKodesh. Amar Rabbi Lazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina. The Gemara here brings from the same Amayre other drashas that are not related to this drasha. So Rabbi Lazar said in the name of Rabbi Chanina, La'olam al tihi birchas hedyet kala be'einecha. The bracha of a simple person should not be light in your eyes. There are two great people in their generation, the two simple people benched them. And the bracha was fulfilled. David with Daniel. We find this by David and by Daniel. David, the barche that is, the barche Aravna benched him. The chsiv ayema Aravna la melech v'gaimer, and here there's a whole bracha that he benched him, and it was fulfilled. And Daniel also, the barche der Yavish. Daniel der Yavish benched him. The chsiv, it says elakach the ant palach le b'tedire, the God that you daven to constantly, yishezvinoch, he should save you, and that bracha was also fulfilled. So therefore, never take a bracha of a head yet lightly. Similar also, when a simple person curses, it also shouldn't be taken lightly. Avimelech cursed Sarah, and he said to her, this should cover your eyes, because he was upset about the fact that she covered from him the facts that she was married to Avram, so she said that your eyes should be covered. And that curse was fulfilled by her son, because it says, Yitzchak was old, and his eyes became he couldn't see. Another statement from the same Amayre. So he said, come and see. The way the Eibishter behaves is not like human behavior. Midas basav v'dam, by a human being, shayfis kedeira. First you place the pot on the stove. Once you have the pot there to receive the water, so you can place the water inside. When it comes to the Eibishter, so he does it in a superhuman way. Completely different. First the Eibishter puts the water there. And then he brings the pot to contain that water that's already there. And this is with the rain. This fulfills what it says. There's the sound of the Eibishter bringing all the water in heaven for the rain. And then the continuation of the pasuk there, it says, Vayala Nesiyim. Then he brings the clouds, which is like the pot, to contain the rain. But first he brings the rain there, and the rain is in midair. Another thing, whenever you say something in the name of the one that you heard it from, maybe gula lo'ilam, you bring redemption into the world. Shenamar, as it says in the pasuk, Vataymer Esther lamelech. Esther said to Achashverosh about the story of Bixam V'Sheresh b'Shem Mordechai. She said it in the name of Mordechai, and that eventually brought the gula that Achashverosh remembered what Mordechai did to him. Yeah, so this inyan, by the way, of Mevi Gula Lo'ilam is brought in the Magen Avraham La'alacha, that when you say something, you should say it in someone else's name, because otherwise it's sort of like a gneva. You have to say it in another person's name. It's brought as a halacha. But if you hear the Gemara is bringing this as like something which is lefnim mishores hadin, that this brings Gula Lo'ilam, that there are situations where you don't have to say it in another person's name. The Rebbe speaks about this in the Sikha. When you say something over, and you yourself, it's not yours, meaning you don't understand it yourself. You're just repeating what you heard from someone else. Then you're mechuyev to say it in someone else's name. But then there's sometimes when you say something and it's really yours because you understand it yourself. So even then there's an inyan to say it b'shem oimirai and maybe gula lo'ilam to bring back the source from where it was taken from, which is l'maylam and aseichel, to bring the source of where it came from all the way back, and ultimately it goes back to Matan Torah that redeems the concept higher than the seichel of it, and that's maybe gula lo'ilam. So the Gemara, another statement that he said, V'amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rab Chanina. Tzaddik avad, when a tzaddik passes away, l'doira yavad. So it's a loss for the generation. It's not, the tzaddik himself is not in any way lost. Adarabah, the tzaddik himself is neshama, is whole and pure, he goes into Gan Eden, but the generation experiences the loss. Mashal adam shavdale margalius. So the example is of a person that loses a precious gem, kamakim shehi, wherever this gem is, margalis shema, it doesn't lose its value. It's still a margalis. It's lost for the owner of it, but the value of the gem is still there, and the same with the tzaddik as well. It says in the Megillah, that Mordechai, Haman, that is. Haman said, everything that I have has no value to me when he sees Mordechai, and Mordechai does not bow down to him. When Haman would see Mordechai, Yeshu B'Shar Melech, sitting by the gate of the king, he said, that all of this is not valuable to me. What does this mean, that all of it is not valuable to me? This is like what Rav Chisda said. Mordechai came with a document showing his riches, and and Haman came with a document showing how poor he was. As we'll see here, the Gemara is going to say that what happened was, at a certain point, Haman was extremely poor, and Pasha to have futi, to have bread, he sold himself as a slave to Mordechai for a piece of bread. So Mordechai had all of his riches, and he also had a document showing that he owned Haman, and Haman really knew that he has a document showing that he's a slave of Mordechai. People would refer to Haman as Avda de Mizdamin Betalmi. This is a slave that was sold for a loaf of bread. So therefore, this is what it means in the Megillah. All of this is not valuable to me. What does this mean? Melamed. What this teaches us is Shekol Genazav Shalaisa Rasha, all of his treasures that this Rasha had, Chakukan Alibe, was engraved in his heart. He was always thinking about all of the money and the treasures that he has. But when he saw Mordechai sitting at the gate of the king, Omar, he would say, Kol Zeh, all of this that's always here in my heart, Einan Shavali. It has no value to me when I see Mordechai, and he realizes that really he was sold as a slave to Mordechai. Another statement of the same Amayra on a different subject. He said, Asid HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Liyes HaTorah B'Rosh Kol Tzadik V'Tzadik. The Eibush is going to be in the future a crown on the head of every single tzaddik. Shenem, as it says, by Yoima Hu Yi Hashem Tzvayis La Teres Tzvi V'Goymer, it'll be as a crown. My La Teres Tzvi, and it says over there in the pasuk called the Tzfiras Tifara, which also means a crown. So what this means is La Oisin Tzivyainai or La Mitzapin L'Tifarte, those that fulfill Hashem's will and await for Hashem's beauty. For them, for these tzaddikim, the Eibush will be for them a crown. Yachai Lakail. So I would think that this is for anyone. Tamad Laima L'She'er Amai, for the remnant of his nation. What does this expression mean? Limi Shemeisim Atzmai Kisharayim. Someone that is so humble that he considers himself to be like leftovers. Someone that has that level of bittul, the Eibush will be to him like a crown. And now the Gemara brings the following, the next pasuk here, and it darshans also what that pasuk means, that the Eibush will dwell upon those individuals. Uleruach mishpat, and those that have a spirit of judgment. What does this mean? Ze adonis yitzrei, someone that judges his Yetzer Hara, doesn't listen to his Yetzer Hara. And then the pasuk there says, Uleyeshiv ala mishpat, someone that sits on judgment. Ze adon denemis la'amitai. This is someone that judges, a judge, a dayan, that judges properly, with truth. Taisus here points out what the lashon of emes la'amita means. You got it right over here on the side, over here in the Gemara. So Taisus says sometimes, even when you have Eidim, and you could just blindly follow the words of the Eidim and say, listen, it's a din emes, this is what the Eidim say. But sometimes, no, you have to inspect and interrogate further to make sure that it's emes la'amita, and not just listen to what the Eidim are saying. Then the pasuk there says, Ulugvura, someone that's strong. Zeh mizgaber al yitzrei, someone that's being strong against his Yetzer Hara. And then the pasuk says, Meshivei mulchama, those that answer back with war. Who is this referring to? This is Eilu shenaisim v'naisim b'mulchamta shel Torah, those that are fighting the battle in the discussions of Torah. And then the pasuk concludes, Shara, and the gates, Eilu Talmidei Chachamim, this refers to the Talmidei Chachamim, shemashkimin u'marivim v'bati kitisiyis v'bati midrashis. They wake up early and stay late in Beis HaKnesses and Beis HaMedrash to learn and daven. Amram Midas Hadin Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Midas Hadin says to the Eibishter, regarding what it says here, that the Eibishter dwells upon the Yidden. Yibbayne Shalayla, Master of the universe, Ma Nishtano Elu Me'elu. Why are the Yidden any different than the Goyim? Amalah HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so the Eibishter answers the Midas Hadin. Yisrael asku b'Torah. Yidden are learning Torah. U'Masaylam la yasku b'Torah, but the Yidden don't learn Torah. Amar lei, so the Midas Hadin says, if so, gam eila, even amongst Yidden, there are those that bayayin shogu or b'sheicha to, that they drink a lot of wine and they get drunk with other liquor and things, and paku plililia, and they stumble, plililia. The Gemara will explain what these terms mean. Ein paku ela gehenim. Paku means they belong in Gehenim. Shenema v'leisiyah zeis l'chol puka. This should not be for you a stumbling block that you'll go into Gehenim. We had this in the Amud before, the blot before, but again to David HaMelech, that he shouldn't stumble. Vein plilia ala dayanim. Plilia means that you're going to be judged by judges. Shenem of anasam beflilim, you have to pay with judges. So what the Gemara is concluding is that even amongst Yidden, if they don't learn Torah, instead they're drinking wine and getting drunk, so even them, the Eibusha will not dwell on them. Going back to the Megillah, it says in the Megillah, V'tamid b'chotza beis hamelech hapnimis, that Esther stood in the courtyard of the king, in the inner courtyard. Amar Rab Levi, so Rab Levi said, what happened is as follows. Kivishi yigia lebeisat slamim. When she came to the room, to one of the chambers there, where there was a lot of the sculptures and all the different things of Avidazara, stalke men shechina. The shechina was removed of her. Amra, she said, Keili, lama zaftani. Eibishter, why did you leave me? This is Kapitel Chav Beis in Tillim, which Esther said. Shema Tadan al Shegig Kemezid. Are you judging me a Shegig like a Mezid, or Val Einis Keratzen, someone that does something willingly, like someone that does something ba'Einis? Meaning I'm coming here to Achashverosh, but really this is all an Einis. So why are you taking away your Shechina from me? Why are you judging me? Even though, the Mefarshim point out, even though the Gemara before said that Esther was going now beratzen, that she said that until now I went to Achashverosh ba'Einis, and now I'm going beratzen. But nevertheless, over here, she's still calling this ba'Einis because she's not doing this because she's interested in going to Achashverosh. She's doing this to save the Yidden from the Gzeiros. So in that sense, she's still an Einis. So why is the Shechina going away from her? Or she says, Shem al shekarasiv kelev, maybe because I was disrespectful to Achashverosh. After all, Achashverosh was then the king, the Moshel Bekippah, and she referred to him as a dog. Shenema, she says there in that capital, Atzila mecherev nafshim miyad kelev yichidasi, save my soul from a sword and from this dog. So Chazra v'karase Aryeh. So then she referred to him again as a lion. Shenema ishiyeni mipi Aryeh. Save me from the mouth of a lion. Then what happened? Vayihi kiroisa melechas Esther HaMalka. When she saw Esther HaMalka, so he stretched out to her his sharvet hazav. Amar Rabbi Yechanan said, Gimel malache hasharis. There were 3 malachim, nizdamnu labayisasha, were there for her at that time. Echad shegbias tzavara, one lifted up her neck, and she should look up, and Achashverosh should see her. Ve'echad shemasha chutz chesed aleh, and one brought a string of kindness on her face. Ve'echad shemasa chesed sharvet, and one that stretched out the scepter of the king that she should be able to touch it. V'kama, how much was this sharvet stretched out to her? Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Shtei ames haya, its length was 2 ames, ve'midei al shtei mesre, and now it became 12 ames long. Al others say 16 amas long. Others say that it became 24 amas long. And Masnita Tana and Abraisa we learn al shishim, it became 60 amas long. Similar we find by Masashal Bas Pare regarding the hand of the daughter of Pare when she stretched out her hand to get Moshe Rabbeinu. And and also we find by the teeth of the Rishayim, this is by Oig Melech Habasha when he picked up a mountain to kill the Yidden. So the simple taich is the teeth of the Rishayim you broke, and he made his teeth grow out very large, and the mountain fell on his head and it got stuck in his teeth. Going back to how long the scepter was lengthened, Rabbi Bar Ufran Ama Mishum Rabbi Lazar Sheshama Mi Rabbi Rabbi Mi Rabbi. They heard from his teacher Masayim. It became 200 amas long. Yom Allah Melech Esther Amalka. So the king says to Esther Amalka, Ma bakashasech. What is your request? At Chatzia Malchus v'Teyas. Until half of the kingdom, I'll do it. So the Gemara says Chatzia Malchus, v'loy kol Malchus. Half of the kingdom, but not all of the kingdom. And v'loy davar shechaytzitz l'malchus. And not something that's going to split the kingdom. Oh mine, what is this that's going to split the kingdom? Being Beis HaMikdash, building the Beis HaMikdash. As Rashi says, because building the Beis HaMikdash is in the center of the world. The Evan Shasiya there in the Beis HaMikdash, this is the center of the world. So he said, I'm not going to build the Beis HaMikdash in the center of the world. That's going to split my kingdom. So what did Esther tell Achashverosh? Yo vaya melech v'Haman ala mishta. Let the king and Haman come together to join me in a mishta, in a meal that I'll make for you. So the question now is, Tana Rabbanan and Abrayis to be learned, Ma ro'asa Esther shezimna as Haman. Why did Esther decide that she's going to invite not only Achashverosh but also Haman to join Achashverosh in this party she made? So Rabbi Lazar said, Pachim tamnalai. She was hiding for him a stumbling block. In other words, she knew that this is going to bring that Haman will stumble. Shenema yihi shulchanam lefneim. Their table of food is in front of them, lepach, and they stumble upon this. She knew that when Haman will come and eat there, it'll cause him to stumble. Rabbi Yeshua said, Mi beis avi lamda. She learned from her father's house. Rashi says, not that she literally learned it in her father's house. Her father passed away before she was born, but she heard from people saying from her father's house. Shanam, the pasuk says, Imrav soinacha. If your enemy is hungry, hachileo lechem v'gaime, give him to eat, and when you give him to eat, this will cause him to stumble. Rab Meir says, why did she do this? She was very concerned about the fact that Haman is getting an idea of his power. It's getting to his head, and he might want to come and overthrow Achashverosh from his throne. So therefore, she wanted to invite him to a meal that he should feel good about his position and come and join her in the meal, and shouldn't have this idea to overthrow Achashverosh. Rabbi Yehuda said, she was doing this all to disguise the fact that she was a Yid. No one should realize that she's a Yid. Look what kind of honor she's giving Haman. Rabbi Nechemia said, this is all for Yidden. So Yidden shouldn't say, Yidden shouldn't say, we have a sister in the house of the king, and they'll take their mind off davening. So they should not realize, they should see, look, what's Esther doing? She's inviting Haman to come to a meal. This will cause the Yidden to daven even harder. Rabbi Yossi says, in order that Haman should be found by her every single time, because if she's going to come and tell Achashverosh about what Haman wants to do, so maybe Achashverosh might change his mind. So like this, Haman should be right there at the moment when she tells Achashverosh about who Haman is. Shimon ben Manasseh said, maybe the Eibusher will feel and realize what's going on, and the Eibusher will bring a miracle. So Rashi says that the Eibusher will see that Esther is being mekadev, this hater of the Yidden, and that even Esther has to go down so low to come and appease even Haman. Maybe that will cause the Eibusher to bring about a miracle. Rabbi Shua ben Karcha said, Asber loy panim, let me show him a nice face. Kidei shiyaharik hu vihi. And then what's going to happen is that Haman and myself and Esther will be killed. In other words, she was ready to die. She said, you know what? Achashverosh will see that there's some relationship between me and Haman, so then he's going to kill me and Haman, and the Yidden will be saved. Rabbi Gamliel says, Melech hafach fachan haya. Achashverosh is a king that changes his mind constantly. So therefore she wanted to have Haman right there when she's going to tell Achashverosh that he has to be killed, so Achashverosh should do it right away and not change his mind. Rabbi Gamliel, after all of these reasons, Rabbi Gamliel said, we still need for this following reason that Rabbi Lazar HaMedai said. Tanya and Abraisa we learned, Rabbi Lazar HaMedai, that he said, Kin asai b'melech, kin asai b'sarim. By inviting Haman, so she caused that the king should be jealous and caused hatred of the king to Haman. Why is he being invited here with my wife? And also amongst all other ministers, they all got a jealousy to Haman. Look at this, Haman is being invited together with Achashverosh by Esther. So that's what she wanted, that there should be a big jealousy against Haman. Rabbi says, we find it says, Lifnei Shever, before you break, Go'ain, you come to the highest place. So she knew she was going to bring him to the highest point, that will cause him to break and fall. Abai v'Rava damri tavayu, and Abai and Rava both said, B'chaimam, when they get heated up, Asher says mishteyim, I give them to drink, and then after they get heated up, so the pasuk there continues and says that that's when they become drunk, and then that's when they get lost, and that's when they causes them to fall. So the Gemara concludes, Ashkechei, about all these reasons here. Ashkechei, Rabbi Baravua le'Eliyahu. Rabbi Baravua encountered Eliyahu. And Amalei, so he asked Eliyahu, Keman Chazia Estevavda. Like, which one of these opinions did Esther see? Then she did. Which opinion? What was Esther herself actually thinking? Amalei, so Eliyahu answered her, Kekulu Tanoi or Kekulu Amirai. All of these reasons that the Tanoim and Amiraim said, these were all the ideas that Esther was thinking about. Then what happened? It says that Esther was talking about his covet that he had, his riches, and all of it, for all of it, Roiv Banav, all of his children. Kama Roiv Banav, how many children did he have? Rav says Lamed. He had 30 children. Asara Meisun, 10 died, they were hung on the tree. Actually they died before. Asara Nitlu, 10 were hung on the tree. Vasara Mechazron al Psachim. And 10 after they were hung on the tree, so the other 10 that remained alive became beggars by the doors. Sorry. Rabbanan say, those children that remained alive begging, Shivim Havia. There were 70 children. There's a pasuk that says, Sveim belechem nishkaru, that niskaru, that is, they were satiated with bread, niskaru, and now they were hired out. So in other words, before they were satisfied with bread, but now they had to become beggars and be hired out. So we al tikri sveim, don't read this as satisfied, el shivim. There were 70. The 70 sons of Haman that became beggars. Rami Barabba Omar, Kulan Masayim Shmoinim Hava. There were 280 of them, of his sons. Shenema V'Roiv Banav, because it says Roiv Banav, and V'Roiv is Begematria, and Roiv Banav. Okay, so V'Roiv Banav is the Gematria of 208. So the Gemara asked, but V'Roiv Banav, V'Roiv is Begematria Masan Var Beisarava. It's Gematria 214, not 208. Rav Nachman by Yitzchak, V'Roiv Ksiv, but it's written without the Vav in the middle of the word, so that's 208. That's how many children he had. Then in the next Perek, the Megillah begins and says, Ba'alai laha, who on that night, Nadadosh Nasa Melech, the king could not sleep. This refers to the sleep of Kaviyachal of the Eibishter Lamaila, that he couldn't sleep. So this is brought in all the Maimarim of Chassidus, where it speaks about Nadadosh Nas Malka Shalayla, that when Yidden are in Galus, Yidden don't serve the Eibishter, so it brings about Kaviyachal a sleep by the Eibishter. The sleep refers to the siluk, that the Eibishter gets removed, so to speak, from the Yidden. And here, Nadada, even while the Yidden were in the depth of Galos, because of the Mesiris Nefesh of Yidden, so this caused, so to speak, an awakening that there's a new Amshach, a new revelation from the Eibishter. Rabbanan Amri, the Rabbanan say, Nadadu El Yainim and Nadadu Tachtainim. The ones above were awakened and the ones below were awakened. Rashi says this refers to the Malachim that were awakened above, and they awakened Achashverosh below to tell him that, you didn't pay back the one that you're supposed to pay. Rava said, Shnasa Melech Achashverosh Mamish. It refers to the king of Achashverosh, that he was awakened. Naftole Milsa Bedaite. There's an idea that fell into his mind. He said, My dikamon. What's happening over here with me? There's a minte Esther laHaman. Esther is inviting Haman to a party together with me. Why is this? Dilma Eitze Kashakli Ilave Dahu Gavre Lemiktale. Maybe there's some kind of idea that they have on this person, referring to himself, that they want to kill Achashverosh. So then he said to himself, if so, is there nobody that loves me, that would let me know about this plan? So then he said to himself, maybe there's somebody that he did something good for me, that I did not pay him up yet for this. And therefore, and therefore people see that I don't pay for what they do for me, so therefore they're not letting me know the plan that's going on, that they want to kill me. Let's bring the books where it's written down things that happened in the past, and let's read what happened there. Malamid shenikroim me aleim. When it says that v'yiyu nikroim, that means that the words were read on its own. And Vayimot, Kosov, it found that it was written Kosav mi bayale. Kosav means past tense. It should have said that it was in the past. So what does this mean? Melamed shemshi moichik. When he brought the Sefer as Achreinis, so Achashverosh's servant, which was Shimshi, was erasing this line where it said about the story that Mordechai saved Achashverosh from Bixen and Seresh. And Gavriel Kaisev. And every time he erased it, Gavriel came and wrote it again. So for Achashverosh to see it. That's why it says Kosov, that it was written right then and there because the Gavriel wrote it again.